You know, one of the ways that the glory of God is revealed is through the worship of His people. Let me ask you a question. How do you worship God? I'm not talking about Sunday morning when someone has a song in front of you and they're asking you to sing love songs to God. Sure, that's worship, but really more than that, worship is your life. How do you worship God? Do you live in a way in your neighborhood, in your life, where you're different and people take note? The Bible tells us to be those kind of worshipers. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Paul is saying, don't be like the patterns of this world, but be different to make a difference. Paul is saying we ought to be the kind of people who live so differently as God's worshipers, have such different standards, live in a way that's so against the grain that the people on the outside take note of the beauty of the church and say, there's something really different about you that I want to know more about. This actually reminds me of my wedding day. I know that sounds weird, but I remember the day where I stood in front of a congregation filled with people that wanted to see me get married. Half the room was my Iranian family and friends. The other half were country people from Alabama. Think people with mullets, and you get a good picture of it. And so there was this church, 400 people packed in there, all staring at the groom. Now they're there and they're staring at me because the bride hasn't come in the room yet. I think most of them were staring at me because there's a chance that the groom might faint, and if you faint, they want to make sure they see it with their own eyes. And so everybody was staring at me. And I remember being so nervous, and then the music started. As soon as the music started, no one had to get up in front of the crowd and go like this to say stand up. Everyone knew what was about to happen. The music starts, dun, 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 and everyone just stood up. And 100% of the people that were staring at me stopped staring at me and started looking at the back of the room. Well, you know what was happening, right? The bride was about to enter in. Everybody was staring at the back, and the doors opened up, and there she was. And as soon as she stepped into the room, I am not kidding you, the air went out of the room. Everyone just gasped. I gasped. I mean, the beauty of the bride demanded the attention of everyone in the room. I say that to say we as worshipers of God, we as believers are the bride of Christ. And when we walk into this world, the world ought to stop and gaze at the beauty of the bride because we're living lives that are so different. We're living lives that are really unusual. We're living lives where people gasp at the beauty of the bride because they go, wow, look at the way that the bride just loved on these orphans in the world. Did you know that there are 143 million orphans on this planet? And did you know that if 6% of the church opened up their home and allowed a child from an orphanage to come into their home, if 6% of the church adopted a child, that every orphanage in the world would be out of children? What if the bride decided to get its dress a little dirty and walked in and said, we're going to stop every orphanage in the world from having children in it by adopting a child? The beauty of the bride, the difference that the bride would make, would captivate the world and grab the attention for the glory of God. God is calling us to be those kind of worshipers, different so that we can make a difference.